Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all very much to the CD launch of Great Women by Gráinne Mulvey, performed by soprano Elizabeth Hilliard. You're all very welcome and thank you very much for coming to this evening's launch. I'm the chair of the Dublin International Chamber Music Festival. My name is Linda O'Shea Farren, and I'm very honoured to have been invited to launch this very important CD of contemporary music from Ireland. I just would like to inform you that this session is being recorded so that it can be posted on YouTube on all our various websites, and hoping that you can consent to that. This CD launch also precedes the world premiere performance of this major new work by Gráinne, and that's going to be performed in a concert tonight at 9 p.m. also as part of the Dublin International Chamber Music Festival. So if you haven't already booked for that, please book via Eventbrite and join us at 9 o'clock. We will have a certain amount of time for questions at the end, but so please put any questions you may have into the chat function as we go along. I'm going to open by contextualizing this great new work, Great Women. And Gráinne Mulvey, the composer, is here with us tonight, obviously. And Gráinne, I'd just like to sort of field a few questions with you. It's the first section of this Great Women. It sets the scene, and it represents the struggle for equality for women in Ireland over the centuries, but with particular reference to the 20th century. Can you explain how, from a composition perspective, you went about portraying such a big concept?
Well, first of all, I had to decide on the text, so that took a while to actually collate them and get them together. But I chose initially to open the whole piece with the text from a speech that she made with the lines, "We have got to get rid of the last harem before woman is free, as our dream of the future would have her." So that was a very significant phrase because it represents so much struggle and strife that women had at that point. And
that was by Countess Marklovitz, right?
That's
Gráinne?
right,
Okay.
yes, that's right. And Elizabeth has a lot of guttural sounds. So at that point, these evolve into that statement. And then the piece progressed then to more a mantra, a type of calm section, which has a lot of overtone singing. And this represents a kind of communion of women coming together and the galvanization of thoughts. And that's how it opens.
So it's quite a complex compositional layering, if you like, because you were trying to, as you have said just there yourself, have a galvanization of goals and missions. And I think when people attend the world premiere performance, which I've had the great honor of hearing already, they will hear that coming through, especially as the work moves along. So Gráinne, you also chose to feature a poem and letters written by Countess Marklovitz. So she features largely in the beginning, and these were when she was in jail. She wrote these poems and letters. And can you tell us about the significance of these writings and how, again, you layered them musically into the work?
Well, she writes a poem which describes the weariness and the drudgery of being incarcerated. She was in Aylesbury prison at the time. And the poem is about the scenery, which is very bleak and full of brick walls and things like that. So it's very stark. And I thought that was significant to point out her constant incarceration right throughout her life. She also writes to her sister, Eva Gore Booth. So she longs to see her. And that's very significant because she was quite a very social woman as well, a very caring, compassionate woman, apart from the great activist that she was as well. And so this is a significant factor, which I thought of, trying to get a humane side of the character as well. Also then her speeches then rallying the cry for getting women to mobilize and galvanize are significant amongst the whole texts that I've used.
And again, compositionally, I think you use various techniques of recordings of multiple voices and.
Yes, yes, I recorded Elizabeth's voice for several different texts. And then that ended in the process of collating what I wanted to use, how to use these then in layering. And she's there embedded in the textures along with other voices. And so this is a continuum that pervades the whole sequence of music that pervades the actual whole piece throughout. So it's significant in that the text is always there, the voice is always there, the woman's voice is always the strongest part, and you know that cry for liberty and for equality.
Absolutely. And then you enter stage left, another fantastic character, Rosie Hackett. And I know you had a struggle yourself, Gráinne, in choosing particular voices to, let's say, highlight out of so many that were available. But Rosie Hackett had been an active trade unionist in Countess Marklovitz's time, and they had actually met through the 1913 Dublin lockout. But Rosie's role was quite different from Countess Marklovitz's in that she was very much working on the ground, not making these big speeches and writing poems from jail. So I'm just wondering how you managed then to incorporate her work, which you probably didn't have as much text from, but.
No, I didn't have as much text. I thought what was significant, though, was her witness statement the week before the 1916 Rising, when she was minding the shop and police entered and there was a scuffle and Connolly just came to break it up. And she was a constant activist for equality and women's rights as well. So she wasn't as militant as she was. Yeah, she was. Well, she was quite active, all right, but she had come on a man, and she was involved with coming a man, and she was involved with in the Heron as well. So it was significant to have her because they were both working along side by side, basically.
And of course, her direct connection with Connolly was a very significant
that's right.
part of it. But then, as you say yourself, Gráinne, having covered Countess Marklovitz and Rosie Hackett from the earlier part of the 20th century, you then bookended this work with the inaugural speeches of both Mary Robinson and Mary McAleese. And these two first women presidents of Ireland are from more recent history. In fact, both of them are very much part of Ireland today, and both of them have contributed to this launch, as you'll see. And did you incorporate them in any different way, because they're very much living, breathing characters of life today in Ireland?
Well, I took significant parts of their tenure as president. For example, Mary Robinson concentrated or mentioned the Cucked as the fifth province, and that's opening the mind, and she wanted a plurality to be part of her presidential role. And so that was a significant part of her speech where she mentions that particular aspect. And then President Mary McAleese, when she talks about the role of peace and building bridges, those significant ideals spoke very loudly to me, resonated, and I thought that would be significant to bring the piece to a close. I thought that would be a really good bookend to have from the early to the end of the women as a calling, kind of from one part of the 20th century into the 21st century nearly. So that's significant then.
And what was interesting too, of course, was in a way the tenses of it, because you as a composer were looking back at Countess Marklovitz and Rosie Hackett and their place in history. But the two presidents' inaugural speeches, although they are past presidents, the inaugural speeches were looking forward to their own presidential terms and what they hope to do with that. So there's a very different sort of feel to all of the speeches and statements that you included.
Yes, exactly. There's far more hopefulness at these points. Yeah. I think it's significant that, you know, we had reached the point where a lot of things, equality and that was reached, and we have the vote, etc. Women are now taking leading roles. We have You know, women empowered leading parties at the moment, and up in the north we've had a deputy first minister and first minister. So you know, there's so many women now coming to power and being recognized for their qualities, and so that's a significant move as well. So even though there is still much work to be done, at least you know, we have the power now to effect change, and things look far more hopeful.
Absolutely. I see a hand raised now, but we are actually going to take questions at the end, if that's okay, because we're going to move to the panel discussion now. Mary Robinson, first woman president of Ireland, honoured us greatly with her contribution to the panel discussion, but she wasn't available tonight, so we pre-recorded that. I just also want to introduce Elizabeth Hilliard, the soprano who performs this wonderful work, who's wearing the fabulous red dress. And Elizabeth Gráinne and I spoke to Mary Robinson, and we'd like to share that with you now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to invite you to a panel discussion that's part of Dublin International Chamber Music Festival in our 51st year. My name is Linda O'Shea Farren. I'm the chair of the festival. We are absolutely honoured to have former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson, the first woman President of Ireland, joining us on the panel tonight. Mary, you're very, very welcome.
Thank you. This is a lovely treat for me, getting away from all the politics and diplomacy and world affairs.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. I'm also delighted to be joined by the composer of this new work, Great Women, Gráinne Mulvey, composer, and the performer of this great new work, Elizabeth Hilliard, soprano. So I'm going to open it with a question to all three of you, to be honest. And it's just, if you could describe in a nutshell your general experience when you were growing up of, you know, powerful women figures or feminism, or Mary, we'll go to you first.
Well, I was obviously influenced by some interesting women, some of them in my own background, and they were nuns. I had an aunt who did great work in India for the Sacred Heart nuns and wrote letters back to my father, first of all of being looking after rich children in a Sacred Heart convent, and then they moved to looking after the very poorest. And she asked him to send the Pall Mall soap, and then we had a letter back how, and I really felt she was somebody making a difference, because the Ireland at that time was one where it was quite clear to me from my earliest time that I was different from my brothers and I didn't have the same opportunities, even though my parents, who were both medical doctors, kept saying, you know, you have the same opportunity, we will educate you to the same level, don't worry, you can do the same things. But I knew it wasn't so. I couldn't become an altar boy, I couldn't, you know. So having figures mattered. I remember Eleanor Roosevelt holding up the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I remember practicing how she held it up like this, you know, at the age of about 14 or 15. You know, this is really something. And you know, other figures, you know, that mattered, writers too.
Fantastic. But you're so right about nuns, really. And we were probably all taught by nuns. And they were great women and still are. So Gráinne,
Yes.
what about you, Gráinne?
Well, my experience was both kind of negative and positive, because I grew up in the 80s. So that was really a difficult time. And Thatcher was in power at the time. But there was lots of things going on, like the Women's Peace March, and that was, and Green and Common. So there was great things that women were doing. And then in college, I had this Dr. Finnegan, who was teaching us social and political science and that, and we were actually very interested in all the issues that she was bringing to the lectures all the time. So we, in that way, it was really good that there was that role model. And then, as you said, like beforehand, in school at that time, there was people encouraging as well, that I met nuns and that, as far as music was concerned. So there were good people around as well. But it was nice to, you know, at least have some opportunities whereby there were like people encouraging in the music field, and actually several nuns, a great teacher there as well. And of course, my mother was very encouraging as well to have feminist ideas and to, you know, not to kind of feel like you couldn't do something, to always strive to do something, get out and do it, or, you know, you're not less than any of the boys or anything like that in the family. So that was a good philosophy as well.
I mean, similar in a way to you, Mary, whereby it's really the very personal thing. The nuns who are in your family, or nuns teaching you, or teachers in school, which is the original source of all of our inspiration, I suppose. And what about you, Elizabeth?
Well, I suppose for me, I'm a little bit younger. I was born in 1980, so I was in fact 10 when you became president. And really for me, at an early age, I was taught by women. There was very strong women in my family. My great-grandmother was one of the first graduates from Trinity College. Her daughter, my grandmother, Ethne, who lived in our house with us, she was a strong feminist, and she always talked of her mother's regret that after she graduated, within 5 years, she was married and living down the country, and she wasn't part of academia anymore. And that her wish was that I would, you know, really kind of stick to my goals and work within the field that I wanted to work in, and not feel that I was needing to get married and be part of supporting somebody else's career. And so I had all these amazing women. Our next door neighbour was Margaret Keogh, was a retired doctor. So I felt that women could do everything. They could rule the world. And at age 10, we had a female president, and it was really the first president that I knew that was elected here. So it was really later on in my teens that I saw that things weren't that rosy picture that I had painted in my head of all these opportunities for women. So what I'd love is, you know, for the future, for everything to be like how I imagined it as a child.
Well, I mean, that's consoling to all of us that, you know, I'm a bit older than you as well, Elizabeth, and that, you know, I had a similar experience, I think, to Mary growing up, that I grew up in Limerick, wasn't even in Dublin, so there were fewer opportunities again. There was no university in my city when I was growing up. There's now a fantastic university there, but didn't exist. So for anybody to go to university was quite expensive, and then I'm one of 7 children. My father died when we were young, and thankfully my mother didn't sort of stop us in our tracks, and she encouraged us to go to university. But Mary, this is the launch of this wonderful CD of the work composed by Gráinne and performed by Elizabeth, Great Women. And you're one of the main sources of inspiration for this work. And in fact, certain segments of your inaugural speech are quoted in it. And if I were, I'm launching this CD, I'm very honored to be asked, if I were to try to find an encapsulation of this work, I couldn't do better than the following lines out of your own inaugural speech more than 30 years ago. You said, "I want this presidency to promote the telling of stories, stories of celebration through the arts, and stories of conscience and of social justice. As a woman, I want women who have felt themselves outside history to be written back into history, in the words of Evan Boland, finding a voice where they found a vision." And this depiction of your own presidency is so much in sync with this new work, which we're launching today. Can you give us some personal insight into your thinking then? Because you had, you know, your campaign to become president was very high profile, and there were no other women presidents. So, you know, you chose this path. And what was your thinking at the time?
Well, in many ways, what I like about the music that you produced, the CD, is that it's the way in which art can affirm women. And a lot of that was in my inaugural address. You've quoted part of it. And then I ended with lines from W.B. Yeats. "I am of Ireland, come dance with me in Ireland." That was also saying, you know, art and culture are so important as expressions of who we are. And I've always felt that very strongly. I remember campaigning before the referendum in 1972 that Ireland should join the European Union, the European Community as it was then, because this would allow us to express a wider sense that the mirror of Britain on Ireland was very negative, and particularly negative in relation to Northern Ireland, and that, you know, we were sort of second best at every level, and that if we could link with France that enjoyed our literature, Italy that enjoyed our culture, our paintings, that this would enable us to breathe. And, you quoted those lines that I borrowed from my dear friend, Ivan Boland. And I thought, coming on this program, that nothing captures more another way of doing what you're doing in this CD than what Ivan did. Shortly before her death, as I'm sure you're aware, she was commissioned by the Permanent Mission of Ireland to the UN and the Royal Irish Academy to write a poem, a magnificent poem called Our Future Will Become the Past of Other Women. And it's all about the women suffragettes. And it's just a beautiful, it's a long poem. It's too long, to speak of, to read the full thing of it. I'm not quite sure what part I would quote from, but let me just quote a little bit from the beginning. Sure. Show me your hand, I see our past, your palm roughened by heat, by frost, by pulling a crop out of the earth, by lifting a cauldron off the hearth, by stripping rushes dipped in fat, to make a wick, make a rushlight. That was your world, your entry to our ancestry in our darkest century. Ghost sufferer, our ghost sister, remind us now again that history changes in one moment with one mind, that it belongs to us, to all of us. As we mark these 100 years, we will not leave you behind. And then it goes on to celebrate them, to name them, and then, to sort of, all those who called for it, the vote for women, all those who had the faith that voices can be raised, can be heard, all those who saw their hopes become the law, all those who woke in a new state flowering from an old nation and found justice no longer blind, inequity set aside and freedom redefined. I mean, it's a magnificent poem that celebrates the role that women played, but the title is so subtle. Our future will become the past of other women. Really, really profound. And she read it in the General Assembly at the invitation of our excellent ambassador to the UN, Geraldine Byrne-Nason, and all the women ambassadors were thrilled. They had it in their own language. They also read it in their language, and it became quite an event. And it mirrored what the Royal Irish Academy had already done with an exhibition of women scientists, which Geraldine Byrne-Nason showed in the UN. So, there's a way in which culture can capture and really speak to the values that we want to really think about when we're thinking about the empowerment of women, feminism, etc.
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the women featured in that Royal Irish Academy exhibition was Sheila Tinney, who's the mother of Hugh Tinney and Ethna Tinney and Deirdre Tinney. And they have had such a profound footprint in the arts in Ireland themselves. She was a scientist herself. So Gráinne, how did this work come about, this wonderful work?
Well, Elizabeth and I have worked together for 13 years at this stage, and I was just counting up last night how many projects we've been involved with, and it's 9. So that's nearly, that's quite a good lot over the years. And her voice is just absolutely magnificent. I think you can hear like it's just stellar quality. There's nothing that she can't do. No matter what you give her at all, she's willing to try out anything. And that's been the relationship. Elizabeth approached me about this it's about probably 2 years, because of the 50th anniversary of Great Music in Irish Houses Festival. And we talked about what we'd like to celebrate. Now, I wanted to celebrate our 2 magnificent female presidents and they bookend the whole work, because I remember when you were elected President Robinson, and it was such a fantastic day. It was just like a huge light was lifted, and we were so joyous, as females. We just thought this was marvelous, and so I wanted to actually have that element of the presidential speeches, and also we thought we'd start with revolutionary women that had so much struggle at the beginning of the 20th century, because it's kind of heartbreaking when you think how much struggle they went through to get the vote, how much struggle there was there to become part of, trade unionists and everything, to get equal rights and equality. So that was something that I thought we would work on and get it through a struggle, and then have the ending part. And so it came, so it's like voices calling to one another, as like in a communion of voices from the early part of the century to the last part of the century, revolutionary woman struggling to modern woman who's, the achievements. And I think as you echo, as you just said, Mary, the voices calling to one another, we're standing on the past, where, you take over from the past of the others. And I just felt that, I was so delighted to be able to work with Elizabeth on this, that it was important that we had it bookended in that way. But we didn't, like 26 minutes seems maybe an awful long time. My goodness, there's so many wonderful women in between there that just, we just couldn't get into the text. But that's how it came about.
Well, I think you put that very nicely, Gráinne, when you say a communion of women calling to each other, which I think echoes what Yvonne Boland is sort of saying as well, passing on the baton and encouraging each other. So Elizabeth, you were sort of the instigator of this project, really, on this occasion. So tell us about that.
So as Gráinne said, like, this is our 9th piece we've done together. Gráinne, her music has played a huge role in my professional career as a singer of music by living composers. And she is an exceedingly generous composer. She creates deeply complicated and complex scores, but she leaves so much space for the performer to make the music their own. And I really wanted to kind of celebrate the work we had done in the past and the work that I really hope that we're going to continue to do in the future. And I felt that a substantial work, 26 minutes is, I know she says there's a lot more we could fit in, but it's a substantial work when you consider it's just my voice and the electronics, which I believe is mainly made of my voice. So I was so delighted to receive the support from Stephen Sutton of the Métier Label to release this work. It's my 2nd release on his label, and also to Ciara Higgins and the Dublin International Chamber Music Festival, as it is now renamed, for their support to commission Gráinne to write this piece for me and to give me this platform to showcase our work together.
Well, as chair of the Dublin International Chamber Music Festival, the honour is all of ours for, the work you do. So Mary, in your inauguration speech, you sort of, you charted out a vision for your presidency that was sort of nationally, and you're talking about the 5th province, globally in your Irish diaspora, for which you will be forever known. And then locally, which was somewhat more unusual for an Irish president to be actually reaching into the living rooms of people, because it was always seen, well, in my experience anyway, as the president represented us globally and abroad and all of that. But you actually brought yourself into all of our homes, which I think is what really endeared you as president. And since then, I think Irish people have been agitating more, and I use the word agitating advisedly, because I do think they needed to push the elected politicians into that 5th province that you spoke about. Maybe you'd like to say a few words about that, but also in particular, whether if you were being inaugurated tomorrow, would you feel the need still to do that? Or I know we've moved along, so I'll let you take over.
Thank you, Gráinne. The reason that I focused on the local as well and felt that a president should be very linked to and play a role in somehow capturing the important work that's going on at local level was that I had learned this during the presidential campaign. The self-development that was going on, the spirit of Mehel that I was seeing all around the country. I had a great outing before the official launch in Ealaíon of the coastal communities from around Ireland. And that set the tone. That really impressed me so much. So that, speaking about community and the local. So, to answer your ridiculous question, if I were to go back now, and
we'd love you. We'd love you.
and be a candidate, it would be to make the climate crisis as local as that every community, in a very positive sense, that farmers, in a very positive sense, not feeling there's something going to be imposed on us from the outside, but actually being really part of how this decision is to be taken place. And farmers are very good environmentalists. They know the land and they know the local issues. And this should be a very, very much an all of people. We now have more or less an all of government that knows how important it is, what a crisis it is. And it really is. There's no exaggerating it. I mean, David Attenborough and others are saying it very clearly. We have no choice if we're going to have a future for our children and grandchildren, but it needs to be bottom-up community, a sense of excitement, looking forward to this future we must be sort of rushing towards. By 2030, we must have made a big difference. And what kind of future will it be? It will be much healthier. We won't have the fumes of fossil fuel, the air pollution that kill a lot of people, including in Ireland. We'll have the digital jobs, we'll have the different economy, and we'll be closer to nature, we'll be rewilding, and we'll have a much more equal world, because we will have to if we're going to get there.
Well, my own daughter, Mary, is a botanist, graduated from Trinity College Dublin, and is currently studying in the Netherlands, doing exactly what you're talking about. So I do think that message has filtered into the next generation, but you're so right, of course. It's reaching into the household and invigorating it as a positive way forward, rather than we can no longer do this and we can no longer do that. Talk about the great things we can do. And maybe COVID is that trigger event that has taught us all to step back a little bit and, and take one day at a time. So Gráinne, from your perspective as a composer, as opposed to Elizabeth's role, which I'll talk to her later about, but what aspects of this project, from a compositional perspective, let's say, rather than the subject matter, which we've been talking about, were sort of unusual or challenging or different? Or, I mean, you've worked together a lot, but I'm sure there were things that stood out this time.
Well, it was difficult because of texts and things like that. So I had to try and think of what to choose and what was important. And when I had chosen the text, I tried to actually think of how this was going to be structured. And Elizabeth and I collaborated over the internet, etc., and over Zoom a few times. And I got her to record some texts and that, so that I'd have it. And then I got time to actually look at the text, and then I made up an awful lot of files and things like that. And I thought of, okay, I'll start with the revolutionary Marklovitz and Rosie Hackett, because they're going to be two very seminal creatures of the early 20th century. So their texts, and culling from that and trying to put it together. And then the inaugural speeches as well of both Mary and President Marklovitz as well. And I at that point, I just thought I had to kind of cull some of the main parts of it as well. So the Ciocad was the thing that really drew me to it, because I felt like opening the mind, the fifth province of, the plurality, everything coming out and being free and giving us so much liberty and equality, etc. All of those issues. And then in the last part, where President Mary Marklovitz's presidential speech is on Europe and everything else, and us being a part of a global community. So that was the other area that was attractive. And compositionally, it was difficult, because I had hours and hours of files to try and do. I even recorded some of my own voice and recorded lots of different things. I tried to think of how to actually deal with this, because it's a big issue. It's like you're trying to take a snapshot of everything that happened from the last century to this century. So that was the process. And piecemeal, I used to send Elizabeth parts of the score. I mean, just like, what do you think of this? Or can you sing this? And she'd be really, well, okay, I can do this or whatever. So I kind of pushed her as well to the limits of her voice, because I knew she could do it. And she's just fantastic, as I said before. So there was never any problem over that. She was completely generous with her time, and it was just a really good back and forth communication. And then after that, a composer has to be alone, it's a very solitary occupation. So you have to retreat and really decipher how you're going to organize all the information you have. Then you've got to process it. You're dealing with electronics, the files. And all the way through, I was wondering, what is the most important thing for women? It's the voice of the strong women and the voice of the weak women equally across the board. And that was when I was thinking in terms of like having elusive voices in the background, stronger voices. So there was that kind of layering process that kept on going through, and eventually having the speeches over different parts of it, and then Elizabeth singing, overtone singing, nice, and also a poem by Marklovitz herself when she was in Aylesbury prison, incarcerated. So that came out really nicely, and so that was really the process. But it was very fruitful. I think we really worked very well together, and yeah, so
absolutely.
happy.
And it probably was a huge advantage in tackling such a big subject as this, that you had such a strong and ongoing relationship with Elizabeth. So from your perspective, Elizabeth, as the solo performer, apart from electronics, on this work.
So yeah, I mean, you're talking about challenges and what was difficult, but really, this project is it was one of the most exciting things I've done in my professional career. I'm so proud that after, like, we've talked about this in meetings, Gráinne, we've had dinner together, we've been talking over a couple of glasses of wine, and now it's finally happened. But really, yeah, challenges. It was very strange not to have actually met with Gráinne during the compositional process. So before, we'd meet up regularly, and our conversations, we'd talk about life, music, and whatever projects we were then doing. And so yeah, it was strange to be recording the material for the electronics apart from her. I really missed the close collaboration that you get, the immediacy and the intimacy of being in the same room together. Like talking about shape and contour and texture, and like which words to emphasize, or even how you might emphasize the meaning, just subtly with shading of your voice in the text. I felt quite alone when I was recording it, but like it was so wonderful. Like it was an absolute lifesaver. Like from March of last year until July, I had no performing at all. So getting the texts and the emails from Gráinne to say, could you try this out? How about this? Will this work? It really allowed me to just continue believing that I was an imaginative, creative artist. So it was challenging, but it was also like life-saving to be part of this.
I suppose that's another whole layer on this composition, that it was composed largely through COVID. And that has its own effect on the work. But Mary, you come from a very strong music family, the Robinsons and the Grucos. And of course, Joe Gruco was a very well-known and CMC represented composer. And you have your own nephew, Malachy, is still a very, very highly respected double bass player. But like me, we both started out in law in our careers, and now I'm in music. So you can see from the discussion between Gráinne and Elizabeth, and it's not something I knew in advance before I started my job, the contemporary music, when the composer is alive, actually a living composer, it's not that the composer just delivers the score at the end and says, perform that, play that for me, it's a much more collaborative process. So I mean, I think the arts have been becoming an increasingly important part of Irish presidencies, and certainly in yours as well. And in what ways do you feel you were able to draw on your own significant arts background throughout your presidency?
Well, the music side is very much Nick's side, I have to say. I can't sing a note, and most of my family on the Burke side would be similar. But I did agree to be a patron of the Irish Chamber Orchestra, and I loved and still love that orchestra because they're so enthusiastic about music, including modern composers. Obviously, Malachy and Anita were part of the draw. But I actually loved everything about the way that they engaged with the music they were playing, and that was, you know, good for me to enjoy as patron. But I also, you know, quoted our poets probably almost too much, but it's what presidents do to improve the messaging. And you know, I was very close to, you know, people like Ivan or Seamus Heaney, lots of Derek Mann, you know, a lot of poets, and they literally, you know, were a kind of support for the messaging because it's a moral voice. You know, President Michael D. Higgins now, you know, because he was a former arts minister as well, you know, is very at home with artists, but knows profoundly how to draw on art to communicate as president. And I think this is something each of us as presidents, Mary McAleese, the same thing. You know, we understand the influence of art and culture on our identity. And one of the things that as president we want to do is reinforce the values of that identity and engage in a more generous opening up of Irish life, you know, of who we are as a people, what we will do even internationally on human rights issues, which I was particularly interested in. So I just wanted in my inaugural address to capture some of that, and I think I think the work, especially, you know, choosing to that passage about the fifth province, you know, I wanted to really symbolize that we had to find that fifth province. Also, I spoke in the inauguration about Northern Ireland, and I spoke about Northern Ireland, and I used the word love. I didn't say the North, and this was well before the Good Friday Agreement. Yes. I didn't say, I deliberately chose to use a language that would reinforce an idea of living together in peace and reconciliation. And it was a very conscious choice.
Absolutely. And I think that message did come through very clearly. Ironically, the Irish Chamber Orchestra was also celebrating its 50th anniversary last year, along with our festival. We're separate, but we both happened to be 50 years old last year, and they're giving a concert in this festival, and Malachy has a solo in it, and that is because we are joining forces now to celebrate our 50th anniversary a year later. So hopefully you will tune into that.
And happy anniversary to both.
Thank you very much. So. Elizabeth, you are interested in the idea of music as a vehicle for change, which, you know, is a very interesting concept. So can you just tell us a little bit about that in the context of Great Women?
So yes, it's lovely to hear you speak, Mary, about the power of arts and culture to change minds. You speak it so clearly. But yes, I'm a proud Irish woman. I'm really proud of my Irish heritage and of the impact that this nation has made throughout the world. But I'm not blind to the injustice that's within our society here in Ireland and abroad.
Especially for women.
Especially for women, especially. And I sometimes feel like maybe I should work as an advocate, as a politician, like actively creating the change I would like to see in the world. But really my skill, my passion and my expertise is in singing, in creating sound and in shaping time. And I have a strong belief that by encountering music that perhaps is challenging or different or not what the listener might expect, the listener can be encouraged to see there's like an infinite, huge amount of ways of experiencing the world, and that there's so many different viewpoints, and that perhaps the beliefs and the views that they had hold as really firmly and as truth could be questioned, and there might be another way. So for me, I strive to create life and meaning within the music at all times, and to fully occupy the musical space, and to hopefully inspire others to fully occupy the space they are taking in the world, and to question what they are bringing into the world and what the future will be.
Yeah, perfect. So we are launching the CD today, and Gráinne, where would you like to see this new work go? I mean, you've given birth to it, Elizabeth, and you have collaborated on this great project, and now it's going to be available to everybody on a CD. And just wondering, you know, where would you hope it to go?
Well, it would be nice if it went to universities and any kind of festivals that feature women's work, or even Mná 100 or the Shannon or whatever, as many places as it could go, to actually just have a life again, because it's quite I know it's going to have a life now, which is great, and it would have performances, but getting it out there to other places and festivals would be something that I'd really, really love. And I'd like to just thank President Mary Robinson for just being here. It's just fantastic to have you here, really. We're so thrilled. And I'd like to thank you, Linda, as well, and all of Ciara Higgins as well, and all involved in this project, because it's been such an amazing, Liz as well. It's been so great, really, the whole way through. We could never have imagined, I don't think, that it could have come to this point. And I'm so grateful. So if it has another life in these areas and these other institutions, I'll be very happy.
Fantastic. And what about you, Elizabeth? Have you any special hopes for it?
Well, I must be more ambitious than Gráinne for the piece. I feel, when I've heard Mary speaking about the UN, I mean, what about it? Why not have this work broadcast in places, you know, everywhere? I don't feel that women's work should be celebrated amongst women and to events for women. Like the words that are in all of these texts that Gráinne has gathered, they're not important just for women. It's for everybody and society at large. So the UN to be singing this in New York, wouldn't that be just absolutely wonderful?
Well, if you can make that happen, Elizabeth, I'll be a very happy woman.
Good.
I'll be delighted.
And Mary, we'll invite you, of course, to join us.
Well,
So,
you know, you have to have the ambition, so I totally approve.
perfect. Well,
Thanks
now
so
we have
much.
the presidential seal of approval. I think all remains for me is to thank you once again, President Mary Robinson. You've been an inspiration to not only the three of us on this in this panel discussion, but to the nation, men, women, and children. And that is a massive legacy for which we thank you hugely. You really are a great woman among great women.
Well, I appreciate that, but it was the greatest honor of my life to serve as president, and they were very fulfilled years, which I look back on, and Nick looks back on, you know, as very special.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, thank you all very much also for joining us. And we have one more little message to share, because President McAleese had also wanted to join us, and she really did try to reschedule. We were going to have the two presidents, but instead she sent us a short video message, which was wonderful, and we'll share that with you in a moment. And after that, Elizabeth will tee up a very short segment of the CD itself. And after that, we will take questions and answers from all of you. Before I thank everybody, and we wrap up in time for the concert at 9, well in time for it. So if we could share Mary McAleese's message as well, that would be very nice. And then over to Elizabeth.
I send very good wishes to everybody involved in the Great Music in Irish Houses Festival, especially, of course, to composer Gráinne Mulvey and to soprano Elizabeth Hilliard, who are surely going to thrill everybody with the world premiere performance of Great Women and the launch of the CD. Have fun.
Lovely. So thank you so much, Linda, for agreeing to host our launch and to officially launch the CD. This is Great Women, a 26-minute work, and we are hoping that as many of you might join us at the concert at 9 p.m. As this is being, we're running the launch on Zoom, and Zoom unfortunately won't facilitate me to provide a performance. So I have prepared a video from the opening 4 minutes of the track, alongside photographs taken by Mark Steadman at the launch of Dublin International Chamber Music Festival in Kilmainham Jail, a place that holds poignant significance to this piece. So I will just now share this track.
Get rid of the last vestige of the harem.
We have got to get rid of the last vestige of the harem before woman is free as our dream of the future would have her. We have got to get rid of the last vestige of the harem before woman is free as our dream of the future would have her. We have got to get rid of the last vestige of the harem before woman is free as our dream of the future would have her. We have got to get rid of the last vestige of the harem before woman is free as our dream of the future would have her. We have got to get rid of the last vestige of the harem before woman is free as our dream of the future would have her. We have got to get rid of the last vestige of the harem before woman is free.
To get rid of the last vestige of the harem. We have got to get rid of the last vestige of the harem before woman is free as our dream of the future would have her.
And thank you very much, Elizabeth, for that. Thank you very, very much. And as I said, at 9 o'clock, the world premiere of the 26-minute work. You'll have heard the first 4 minutes. So Eventbrite is still up and running, I believe, if you want to book, and admission is free. All that remains for me is to do 3 things. First of all, to declare the CD officially launched. Secondly, to thank all involved, in particular the Arts Council of Ireland, Chomhairle Ealaíon, both for the commission and for funding the CD. So they made a very significant investment in this work, and I think you'll all agree it was very warranted. Stephen Sutton of Divine Art Records for producing the CD, I know that Elizabeth and Gráinne want me to thank the Dublin International Chamber Music Festival. So it's sort of thanking myself, but mostly thanking my board members for hosting the CD launch at the festival. And we all want to thank the Contemporary Music Centre Ireland for the technical support for this launch, and in particular my colleague Jonathan Grimes, who's working on a Friday night for us to do this. Thank you very much, Jonathan. He's behind the scenes, but has put a lot of work into this. So I will now open for questions. I know somebody, he's giving me the thumbs up. Questions from anybody. I know there was a question earlier on, somebody had their hand up. Here we go. Jack O'Sullivan, can you, Jonathan might unmute you there. Jack.
I've muted myself now. Thank you for allowing me. Oh my goodness, I'm in first. That was a superb launch, Linda. Thank you so much. And really looking forward. And what I loved so much about Mary's talk was something we must look to the future, where we need to align ourselves more with other European countries. She spoke about Ireland and France, Ireland and Italy. And Gráinne knows very well that my nearest and dearest is from Lithuania. We went to Lithuania for a music festival to hear one of Gráinne's pieces, and it was lovely. But we need to align ourselves with Europe very, very much more. In the time when, before Mary became president and around that early time, we were far too aligned to our closest neighbor. Now we need to see a much stronger Europe, strengthened by diversity of culture. So thank you very much for that. And my only one question is, where do I find that wonderful poem by Ivan Boland, which was spoken at the United Nations? Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Gráinne. And
thanks, Jack. Thanks so much.
We'll Google it for you, Jack. Yeah. She was reading from a book. She actually had it ready. It was lucky I chose that particular segment from her inaugural speech. We didn't talk to her in advance because we were afraid it would ruin the naturalness of it.
Yeah.
So you'd think I had a cue that she was going to quote from it, but no, it was just sheer coincidence. Right. But I do see poet Theo Dorgan on the call, and it's so nice to see a poet. Maybe he knows where you can get it. Maybe he's gone off to get the book with any luck. Oh, he's running back, Theo. Theo, Jack's wondering. You need to unmute yourself, Theo.
The icon at the bottom of the screen wasn't working. Jack, the poem is in her last publication, which in fact appeared posthumously. It's called The Historians. It's published in the UK by Carcanet and in the States by W.W. Norton. And you should be able to get it because I know they have it in stock from Books Upstairs in Dublin.
No, that's a profoundly detailed response. Thank you, Theo, for that.
Thanks, Theo.
I think 10 out of 10 for that. Any other questions? I know Annie, a woman called Annie, who has Annie's iPad, had a question earlier, but we weren't taking them till the end. Just
maybe put a comment into the chat if you'd like to make a question,
or else just unmute yourself.
No, no one can unmute themselves. I have to do that.
Okay.
But if you want to speak, just put something into the chat. I don't see any. Some lovely thank you for the lovely comments that I'm receiving. Some of them are private and some of them are coming through. So thank you all. Thank you all.
Fantastic. Well, if there are no questions, we see lots of wonderful familiar faces. I see the artistic director, Ciara Higgins, of our own festival, smiling in. I'm sure other members of the board. I think I saw John Keoghan earlier, and hopefully John Reynolds, Sheila de Courcy, and Gráinne Bushell. And of course, we have our executive director, Laurie Carr, as well. And Martin Davidson, I don't know if he's on the call, but this is to thank my own board members as well. And to thank you all for coming. Thank you, Gráinne. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks. And we're launched.
And I've one more in the chat there. I'm going to put it in again. There's a link to purchase the CD, because normally, as you all know, if you come to a CD launch, there's boxes of CDs on sale, so there's no pressure at all. But if you would like to buy a CD, you can pop along to my website there, where I have a link to buy it. There's a link to buy it directly from me and also from Divine Art Records. So thank you all for coming, and again, thank you, Linda, for a fabulous I asked you because I knew you had such a history with human rights and your background in law, and I said she would be absolutely excellent. So thank you so much for doing this for us.
Thank you all
Thanks,
very
Linda.
much. Now,
Thanks so
maybe
much.
you should go away and get yourself a little bite to eat, maybe a cup of tea or something stronger since it's Friday night, and join us at 9 o'clock via Eventbrite. Thank you all very much. Good
Thanks,
evening.
Linda.